Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session, Test Your Metal, drawing parallels between heavy music and testing concepts with guest speaker Paul Grizzaffi. Despite the fact that I'm sure most of you know Paul extremely well, I will do a brief intro. So Paul is a modern day Renaissance man. He's a quality and testing leader, test automation architect, manager, and developer with vast experience and expertise in planning and implementing test automation initiatives, frameworks, and tool systems. In his role as principal automation architect at Magenic, he helps customers optimize testing effectiveness and efficiency by applying automation where there is business value, as well as mentoring young automation engineers. Paul is also a well-known industry thought leader, automation evangelist, and an accomplished keynote speaker and writer, and has spoken at leading international conferences. This year alone, you can catch him at STPCon, Star East, Accelerate, and Agile and DevOps West, just to name a few. I do not have any idea where he finds the time, but in his spare time, Paul is also an advisor to software test professionals and STPCon, as well as a member of the Industry Advisory Board of the Advanced Research Center for Software Testing and Quality Assurance at the University of Texas at Dallas, where he is a frequent guest lecturer. And if you are not already, I do recommend that you follow him on Twitter because he has an excellent Twitter feed. So without any further ado, I think that we'll let Paul speak. So Paul, the stage is yours.
All right, well, thank you for that wonderful intro. I'm not sure I can live up to that. Modern day Renaissance man. I may start putting that on my bio from now on. But yes, thank you for joining me, everyone, today. We're going to talk about three things that I really love to talk a lot about: testing, automation, and metal. And if you're not a metal fan, that's okay. I've given this talk or versions of this talk to other people who are not familiar with that brand or that style of music, and they still were able to appreciate the topics that I'm putting forward here. But for you metalheads, you are in for, I hope, a treat today. So I'm going to spare you most of this because Adi did a much better job than I can on this particular activity. If you do want to contact me outside of this forum, here is my info. You can take a screen cap of that, or when I take questions later, I'll have this up and you can jot it down then. So we talked a little about who ostensibly I am, but who else I am is I'm a music fan. I grew up with music in the house, and then when I was very young, my cousins came to live with us, and they brought with them their Beatles records and their Kiss records, and I couldn't really appreciate the Beatles records at that time, but boy, I really love those Kiss records, and it just got progressed more and more and more, where I got into more complicated music, more heavier music, faster music, and I love Kiss. I'm kind of sad that I missed their farewell tour in Dallas, but things happen when you get older. So, and I've also been lucky. I have a really good friend who's in the music business, so I've had the opportunity to spend some time with people that when I was younger and growing up in a little oil town in Louisiana, I thought, wow, if I could just see these guys on stage once, that would be great. Now I've gotten to go and spend time with them, have dinner with some of them, have drinks with some of them. Yeah, so that's been a really cool aspect of my life that I've gotten to take advantage of. But before we go on, I don't own the music, the artwork, the lyrics. I've got no actual ties in any of that. Everything belongs to who it belongs to. And at the end, I do have a big list of where I've got all the images and all the band websites. So if you want to go and explore a little more about some of the bands, some of the songs, or some of the artists, you can go and do that. I do own the stories and the thoughts and the impressions of how the music has influenced me and the similarities that I find between this music, specific lyrics, and my career. And this is for educational purposes only, so there's some legalese type stuff here, that fair use and all that I think we're in good shape for. All right, moving on. A talk that includes heavy metal cannot be complete without mentioning the late, great Ronnie James Dio. For From his song Rainbow in the Dark, the first big song that he had with his solo band Dio, I cry out for magic and I feel it dancing in the light. And the way this has always sort of spoken to me ever since I was a younger man out in the automation game was, we're all looking for the magic. We're all looking for that magic spell, that incantation, that magic wand that is going to take what we're doing and magically have it tested and magically have the automation going. But there is no magic. There is no magic. This is a lot of hard work. Automation's hard work. Testing is hard work. There are no shortcuts there. There are only business decisions that we make to help us decide what to test, how to test, where there might be some value in automation and where there might not be value in automation. When we talk about magic and we hear people with this idea that automation is just something that happens, it's just something else that you do with your job, those are misplaced expectations in my experience. What we have to do is we really have to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about automation, we need to keep in mind what I call the automation ecosystem. And that consists of three parts. One are the goals. And I'm not talking about automation goals. I'm not even talking about testing goals. I'm talking about business goals, because the business goals are what should be driving what we're delivering to our customers, our clients, our users, and everything should be in support of achieving those business goals. The automation should be in support of the testing activities, which should be in support of delivering the appropriate value to our users. So if we don't understand our business goals or we don't know what they are, we have a high likelihood that we are going to be testing, delivering, developing, automating the wrong thing. So we really have to be focused on and in line with those goals. There's the audience, and the audience here I think has two parts, which is the direct audience, which is who's typing the keys for the automation, who is executing the automation, who is triaging and then acting upon the results of what the automation has delivered. But then we have the indirect audience, those people who are, quote, interested in the automation and its results, possibly the people paying for it, possibly the higher level leaders who expect some value coming out of the automation. We can't completely forget about that particular audience as well. So when we decide to automate, when we decide how to automate, we have to do things that are appropriate for the particular audience. And then the third is the environment. This is the one most of us get right. What are we testing? How are we testing it? Is it automatable? Is it not automatable? Well, we might not always get that one right, but we try to get that one right as best we can. But as a takeaway for this, there is no magic, and just consider the goals and the audience and the environment when we decide what and how to automate. And the next few slides are going to be in support of this whole ecosystem kind of thought process. We'll advance quicker here. Bolt Thrower is a death metal band, and I don't listen to a lot of death metal, but I really like Bolt Thrower because I find the drumming is very interesting. I find the guitar harmonies are very interesting, which is odd for a death metal band to have harmonies and such. But this is one of my favorite songs by them, and it's called Lest We Forget. And the lyrics are, lest we forget, thoughts will always haunt the mind. Lest we forget, the bitterness remains. And I think we forget, or maybe some of us never really knew, that automation development is software development. And I have a whole separate talk that I do on that with a lot more details in it, but it's software development. And if we don't treat it as such, we're probably going to wind up with something that doesn't meet our business goals, because they're the stated business goals around we're going to deliver faster, or we're going to beat competitor number 3, or we're going to deliver these features so we make all this money. But there's also and we can sustain the value we've created. And we'll talk a lot about value as we go through these slides here as well. But if we can't sustain the value, if we've written a bunch of crap, we can't sustain the value. Eventually that's going to go down the toilet. Same with the automation. if we don't treat automation as software development, we're going to at some point realize we've created crap. And I see it a lot as a consultant. I've been a consultant for the last couple of years. And a lot of times when I go in to help a company or a team with their existing automation that's just not producing what they would like for it to produce in the way of value, it's because, or frequently because, that it wasn't treated as a software development initiative. And when we speak about it as software development, what do we do from a software standpoint? If we're developing a product, we have developers, and that is their job, to develop that software. And there are practices and all sorts of things around it. There's planning. They take the code and they store it in a library or a code repository. They have a continuous integration environment, possibly a continuous deployment environment, so that at any point of time, you know what the relative health, or you have at least some idea of the relative structural health of your product. Does it build? Can it be deployed? Is there a heartbeat? Does it have a pulse? They perform activities like coding inspections or code reviews to look at the code. Is it quality code? Is it something that we can maintain? Is there anything in there that intrinsically is just not going to work, or it's not going to scale? There's documentation, and I'm one of those heretics that thinks that in-code comments are not inherently evil, and I'm happy to die on that hill at some point if someone wants to discuss or debate that. But some form of documentation about why is this software here, and why did we develop it this way, and why maybe we didn't develop it some other way. Those are good, interesting bits of documentation. And maintenance. A lot of times with automation, we don't think about maintenance. We don't budget in time for, oops, we found a bug in the automation. Got to fix that. Hey, the product has changed, so now the automation flows that we created don't match up. We need to change those. But if we haven't allocated time for these types of maintenance activities, we're going to run up against the problem of, oh, wait a minute, this automation isn't all I thought it was, because now I have to budget time for all these extra activities. That's because of the misplaced expectations of the magic that we talked about on the first slide. And expertise. Automation is software development, but it's a different kind of software development. It's not the same as web front-end development or back-end development or single responsibility service development. Each of those is a specialty under software development. So is automation. We have to have appropriate expertise, otherwise we are going to wind up with maintenance problems and other types of situations there. And there are three ways to get expertise. One is hire it in. Hey, I know that I'm going to have this huge automation initiative. I'm going to hire an automation lead or an automation architect or someone that's got a bunch of experience in implementing automation endeavors in a particular company or organization. Or you can rent it. You can bring in people like me to get you ramped up, get you started, train you up, and then we evac out and you go on about your merry way. Or you can get it yourself. The company can get it itself. But the company has to be tolerant of the rework, the refactor, because when you do it yourself, you will make mistakes. And it's the same with other software development. Hey, we're a company that does Java, but now we're going to start doing some .NET. Well, either you can seed the team with .NET expertise, or you can have your team come up to speed on .NET. It's going to take longer. There will be more mistakes up front, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as the company and the leadership is prepared for that level of churn and that level of delay when you're putting something out. So remember, automation software. Most people on this call have probably heard of Metallica. Even if you're not a metal fan, Even if you're not a Metallica fan, most people have heard of this band. My mom has probably heard of this. Well, okay, she's heard of it from me, but other people's moms have probably heard of this as well. And this is from their first record called Kill 'Em All, and the song is called Seek and Destroy. And the chorus is very simple and it's repeated a few times. It's called Searching, Seek, and Destroy. And really, what we're talking about here is searching for and destroying value reducing events and situations in our product. We don't want to degrade any value that we're getting. We don't want to lose money. We don't want to lose time. We don't want to redo things that we didn't have to redo. We want to reduce all of these things as best we can. And when it comes to software and we're running automation, what we want to do is we want to be able to understand, hey, we had these expectations that we coded up. We call it automation. And some of it didn't work. Some of it came back and didn't meet the expectations in the code. So we have what we commonly call a test failure or a script failure or an automation failure. We have something that failed. What do we do now? Well, without proper logging, it's going to be very difficult for the people triaging the problems, saying, hey, here is what happened. Now let's take that and hand that over to the development team and say, here's what happened. Here's how it happened. Go and figure out what to do about that. How do we resolve this? Is this a problem? If so, is it something we're going to fix? And if we're going to fix it, here's all the information that I got for you or that the automation returned for you in order to help you do your job. So in order to do that, we have to have logs, reports and errors and different things like that. And there are three aspects that I like to look at when we talk about logging and reporting and results from automation. One is all this information has to be accessible. It can't be squirreled off in somebody's desktop logs directory and then emailed out to the team. That doesn't work. It doesn't scale very well. The client that was on not very long ago, part of the reason their original automation endeavor failed is because the people that needed to have access to the results could not get easy access to the results. So we spent a whole lot of time looking at their results, their log files, figuring out how to make it accessible. The second is actionable. If there's stuff in that log file, in that error message, in that results file, that is not providing value, it should be pulled out. And it could be direct value, as in, here's where I found a disconnect between what I expected and what I wanted and what I got. Or it might be more tangential to that. Here are the 17 steps that I went through before I got to this expectation that got missed. So anything in there has to be providing value. Otherwise, what you're going to wind up with is a bunch of noise in your logs and report files, and they're going to be harder to go through and use for debugging, and it's going to take you longer to do that debugging. Now, it's a bit of a black art, because if you put too much in, then it's noise and it takes longer to do your job. But if you don't put enough, then, oh boy, if I had that one more log statement of what this value was when this particular event happened, I would be able to reproduce this and I would be able to figure out what's going on. Let's run it again. Or, oh, it's an intermittent issue. Let's add that log statement in, and when it happens again, then we can go through and reproduce it. So likely there'll be some tuning that you're going to do over time there when you audit your logs. And the third is they have to be understandable. I like it when I get a log file or a log message that says, I could not find the web element with ID ABC123XYZ element OP, because then I can just take that and I can go over to the web page and I can look at the source and I can say, yes, this was there. No, it wasn't. Something changed, whatever the problem was. But not everybody is that intimately familiar with what the HTML is and what it should be. So what I like to do is deliver information in the logs, and what I coach is that we deliver information in the logs that is understandable and as often as possible in a vernacular or a business jargon that the team understands. So while having that ID is essential to developers and pretty essential to automation developers like myself, what would be a lot better for the average consumer of this log is, hey, you know what? The login button didn't exist when I tried to click it. Or the buy it now button existed, but it was grayed out when I tried to click it. Just depends on whatever your information you're kind of looking for there. If you can deliver that kind of information, your debugging costs frequently will go down because a lot more can be done at the higher level. A lot more can be garnered and understood at the higher level without having to burrow down, which takes time, effort, and expertise. So the real guidance here is that make your logs accessible, actionable, and understandable. So for all the people that have heard of Metallica, a very small subset of them have heard of this band called Diamond Head. Diamond Head was part of an initiative of bands back in the late 70s to early 80s called the New Wave of British Heavy Metal. Bands like Diamond Head and more popular bands and more famous bands that you have heard of, such as Iron Maiden and Def Leppard, also came out of this new wave of British heavy metal. I love this sort of period of time. This is my sweet spot for lesser known and one-off bands of heavy metal. Diamond Head was not a one-off, and they were quite big at the time. Metallica will list them as their primary influence or one of their primary influences on how their music came out. Helpless is actually a song that Metallica covered on their Garage Days Revisited EP. So you can go and hear the Metallica version. You can go and look up the Diamond Head version. But I like this particular lyric, and it always has stuck with me. And this business ain't for laughs. Businessmen don't like it so. And the reason it sticks with me is because automation is a business decision. We should not be automating because we do Scrum or because we do DevOps or because we do Agile. We should be automating because it provides value. And for things that don't provide value, we should not be automating. We should not be doing it all. If they don't provide value, whether it's automation or testing or development, if there's no value in it, we probably should not be doing it. But certainly when it comes to, hey, we're going to automate, okay, that's great because it's going to provide what for you? And if you can't answer that question, you should probably step back and say, yeah, what is this going to provide for me? And what is it going to provide that directly or indirectly helps us achieve those business goals that we talked about earlier in the talk today? Because if we're not doing things in line with that, we're probably making a mistake. So we do have to consider our ecosystem and concentrate on the value. If it's not providing value, don't do it. And value is very context dependent, because what is valuable to one organization or to one company or to one team may not be valuable to another organization, company, or team. Even same teams or even teams or organizations within the same company, they may have the same ultimate business goals, but at the implementation of how do we achieve those goals, there may be things that are valuable for one team that are not valuable for another. So it's interesting to try and coalesce all those things and make everybody have the same value assessment. And to some extent, there has to be that because we are working as we get less and less granular in our goals up toward the same goals. But the actual implementation level can change. So we have to watch when we say, why aren't you doing thing X? That's more valuable. We're getting all this value out of it. But when we turn around and say, hey, why aren't you writing with Selenium and Java? And the other team will say, because nobody on our team knows Java. We all know Ruby, or none of us are actual programmers. We're all data engineers, but we sure know how to use a record and playback system. Boy, record and playback gets a really, really bad rap. And some of that's on the vendors because I think it's been marketed and sold improperly. But certainly record and playback can add value in certain situations as long as we're sensitive to what the downsides are. And if you disagree, go listen to some of the talks by Jason Huggins. So really, consider the business goals and the context before you decide to automate, or before you decide to automate a particular thing. If you can't answer the question, what value is this adding? Then you really need to rethink what you're doing. So sticking with the new wave of British heavy metal for a moment, one of my favorite bands ever, Raven. This is one of those bands that I first got wind of them in a magazine, and then I bought one of those $2 compilation mixtapes out of the bargain bin. One of their songs was on there, and then I fell in love at that moment. I've been a huge Raven fan ever since probably 83, 84. And I had the opportunity and the luck to actually hang out with the guys, talk to them a bit. Super, super nice guys. If you ever get a chance to see these guys, it's a great show. They put on the same show, whether they're in front of 70 people or 70,000 people. They love their fans. They'll talk to you, take pictures, everything. Super cool. One of their more popular songs and more popular albums is called All for One. And the lyrics that stick out for me here are, hear the call, all for one, one for all. And what this means to me in the testing, software delivery, automation context is that automation is, it works best as a cross-team endeavor. And what do I mean by that? Well, certainly the people typing the keys for the automation, whether you have separate automators or the team as a whole is doing it, obviously they have to be in communication with the testers. Why? Because automation is in support of testing. Testing has the bigger, here's what we're going to test. A subset of that is appropriate for us to automate. And here are the things we're going to automate, and here's the value we're going to get out of it. So we have to be in tight coupling with them. Also the developers, of course, right? Because we may want some things in the product changed for observability or testability or automatability, any of those particular items. But what about outside of the team? Why would we want to involve the business, quote, the business in our automation endeavor? Well, partially because they're paying for it. They're going to want to know what the value is. But also, when we get into these situations where, hey, we're going to adopt a new technology for our product development. And I've had this happen a couple of times in organizations that I've been in. The development team decides they're going to take on or they're going to migrate to a new technology, but the existing test infrastructure, automation infrastructure, isn't prepared for that. So there's going to be additional work, potentially a lot of work in one case that I was looking at, a lot of work to re-automate everything because of this complete shift in development paradigm, technology paradigm. And that was done, and it was just sort of, okay, well, test it manually. Eek! So we can dissect the whole test it manually statement some other time, but the idea of that, it doesn't matter, we're making this design change or this implementation change, irrespective of anything else, is a problem because now we're not aligned with the business goals, because now we're eroding our value. But if we involve the business, the people who are making the business level decisions and say, hey, look, I understand we're going to need to go to this new technology to have feature X or to appease customer Y. Let's just get it out in the sunshine that there is a huge effort outside of the initial development from the testing standpoint and for the rehabilitation and the refactoring of the automation. Is now the right time to do that? The business team can help make that decision. Now, what about security? As automation people, as test people, but certainly as automation people as well, we like to do a lot of squirrely things. We like to do a lot of things that are Oh, they're outside of what the normal corporate channels would like because it can be a bit risky. We're trying to expose different interfaces, different protocols, different programs to parts of the network that may not be used to having that. And we may need special IDs. And this is something I see a lot is, hey, I need to run my automation unattended in my CI environment, or I'm going to kick it off at midnight, or whatever the right answer is there. I need a shared ID, service account, whatever the right vocabulary is for your technology and your organization. And a lot of companies, that really raises the security guy's hair up to the ceiling because why? The security team wants to be secure. And as soon as we start having shared IDs and shared passwords or well-known IDs and passwords, they get really hinky about that, understandably so. Understandably so, because it is a risk that we're introducing that hopefully has some larger business value that makes up for the amount of risk that's being introduced. But if we don't have this relationship, this working relationship with the security team, the answer is going to be no. You can't do that. That violates protocol. But if we partner with the security team, and these other teams I'm going to talk about here shortly, if we partner with them and say, look, we all have a business goal. Remember the big business goal from the DO slide earlier? We have the big business goal or the set of goals. We as a company, as a corporation, as a complete entity, need to meet those. We need to achieve those. In order to achieve that at my micro level, these are the things I need to do. Help me implement this in a way that doesn't make you want to vomit, but I can still do the testing or the automation or the implementation or the whatever that I need to do. And the partnership angle has worked really, really well for me over the course of my career. Instead of saying, hey, I need, sitting down with the powers that be and commiserating and then coming up with a collaborative solution that works for everybody or comes close to working for everyone. And the same with release management. Hey, I want to be able to run my automation on every deploy to any of the pre-production environments. A lot of companies have that pipeline locked down for various reasons, mostly because they don't want to support a bunch of junk that gets shoved out there. If we partner with release management, sometimes they let us do stuff. The client I'm working with now, hey, you know what? It's completely locked down for everybody except the release management team. Oh, and the automation team, because we know what we're doing and we have a lot of need to get in there and do hands-on things. They negotiated that relationship. It's a very healthy and well-gelled relationship. What about the legal team? Anybody really out there have a working relationship with your legal team? I didn't used to at the previous company I was at. I didn't. And then there was an edict that came down that said legal has to review every software license, whether it's a pay license, a free license, an open source license. We have to review everything. And I was like, oh my Lord, my hair was on fire and up to the ceiling at that point. I'm like, this is going to completely slow us down. So I scheduled a meeting with the legal team and I said, look, here's our situation. We don't put any of our stuff into the product. So what we came up with is, yeah, they still wanted to review it, fair, but the paperwork was a lot smaller and they tended to fast track them because they were looking for very specific red flags that were outside of what they would be looking for any software that was going to be added into our actual product. So having these relationships can absolutely make your software initiative, your automation initiative move a lot smoother and allow you to keep your value and not erode it by having to succumb to regulations that are in the way of you producing your value. Iron Maiden, outside of Metallica, probably the currently biggest heavy metal touring act in the world right now. And this is from their album called Somewhere in Time. Very cool album cover, very complicated. There are pictures and little images and bits from all of their previous albums shoved in here. So if you're a fan, you can go out and spend the time as sort of a Where's Waldo thing and say, oh, this is from this record, this is from this record. The first single off the record was called Wasted Years, and this really appeals to me from a business standpoint. And the lyrics are so understand. Don't waste your time always searching for those wasted years. And what are the wasted years when we talk about automation? The wasted years are the sunk cost. For those of you not familiar with sunk cost, it's the cost incurred but not recoverable. And a lot of times we fear to move away from what we've already implemented, or we just can't. We can't. The software is our child. It's our baby. It's our sweetheart. I can't move away from that. I'm uncomfortable with that, either because I love it or because I'm going to be uncomfortable working in a different framework or tool or environment. Or, hey, we sunk $1 million into this and it's not working. We need to make a pivot, but boy, that's going to look really bad on me. So there's this notion of throwing good money after bad. So it was bad money, the first $1 million that you spent. You didn't know it, though. You didn't know it. You thought you were doing the right thing. And yeah, you may have to take it on the chin a little bit for that. But in the bigger business sense, the right thing to do sometimes is to abandon it and not just keep trying, oh, we can fix it, we can fix it, we can fix it, because now we start getting into the sunk cost fallacy, which is we can recover sunk cost eventually. But at some point, it doesn't make sense anymore. I have sunsetted, end of life tools and programs and stuff, and it's not always met with the good sound business sense. We abandon logic when it's something that we spent a lot of money on already. But we can't go chasing those wasted years. We can't. It is bad business to do that. And we have to set things up to learn as we go. We have to. Because if we don't learn as we go, we're going to have problems. And if we're able to, and we're not all able to, but if you're able to start small and evolve and iterate as you go, a lot of times you're going to be able to make these pivots so that you don't wind up with a sunk cost. You can wind up with, okay, we need to make some changes, but it's not throw everything away. It's redo 20%. Wow, got to redo 20%. That's X thousands or X millions of dollars of effort. Yes, but look at all of the value we've added between the time we created this and today. So we're going to eat up a little of that value. We're going to eat up a little of that goodwill, knowing that we're going to build it back up after. So there has to be an understanding of business. And when I say business, I don't mean you need an accounting degree and get your little green visor and your arm straps on and you're up there with the abacus and the adding machine. But the understand basic value of that's a lot of effort. This is a little effort. This is going to save me this time. This is going to enable me to do this other thing. Being able to discuss it in a value standpoint as opposed to a sheer technical standpoint is going to greatly raise the odds of your automation initiative being successful. So remember the sunk cost fallacy, and remember your business goals. And if what we're doing is either going to not meet the business goals or worse, it's going to keep us from meeting the business goals, we need to seriously consider abandoning it. Rush. Rush is not usually considered a heavy metal band, but if you listen to some of their music, there's some heavy things going on in some of those songs. And this is one of my favorite records favorite songs off of a record called Permanent Waves. And the song's called Natural Science, and actually the whole song appeals to me, but the one that appeals to me in sort of this automation way are the wheels within wheels in a spiral array, pattern so grand and complex. Boy, we in automation really like to do it all. We like to, quote, automate it all. We're going to start at point A, and we're going to go all the way to point Z. And we are going to do everything that we can, including drag it kicking and screaming across the finish line for that last mile. But that's not often the best way to go about it. Automation, we tend to think so often of it being an all or nothing activity. Either we automated it or we did not. One of my blog posts is on automation. Is it automated not being a binary answer? There might be a sort of or a yes but kind of answer there, or even a no but kind of answer there. Because what happens is we get to the point where we say, hey, we're able to automate 10, 20, 30, 80, whatever percent. And the last bit's really hard. So now we're going to have to write these scripts that are going to call out to PowerShell, and then PowerShell is going to kick off the process on this other box, and then we're going to tunnel over to PagerDuty, and it's going to alert these other pieces, and we have all of this stuff that's really cool. I love making these things. Really cool. It touches all these systems, and it demos really well, and it's brittle as hell. The first little change that comes along, the first timing consideration, the first API change, it all goes down. It all goes down, and we have to refactor. And what happens is the value that we built up in that first 10, 20, 30, 80% starts being eroded. It's very easy for us to lose value, very easy for us to erode value by not paying attention to what we're doing. And we wind up with this huge Rube Goldberg machine, sort of like the game Mousetrap, where you have to do 17 things to get the net to fall on the mouse, whereas if you'd have just decided to throw the net on the mouse by hand, manually, if you will, it would be done already. It would be done. So beware of Rube Goldberg machines. They're fun. They're really fun, but they're not always valuable. And is going that last mile valuable? And remember, is it automated is not a yes-no question. It's how much of this is automated and is it providing value? So I'm a huge, huge Ozzy Osbourne fan. As some of you may know, some of you may not, Ozzy used to be in Black Sabbath. He left, he came back, he left, he came back. Back in the 90s, they did a big reunion tour and reunion record. And the song Spiral Architect has always been one of my favorites. It's a little more the progressive experiment side, not quite what you would typically expect from a Black Sabbath record, but it's so well performed on this live, and this is 30 years after the original record came out. Ozzy sounds good, the band sounds good, so that's why we went this album cover here. Also because some people might find the original album cover a little harsh for their taste. But anyway, Spiral Architect, the watching eyes of celluloid tell you how to live. Metaphoric, motor replay, give, give, give. And to me, there are several songs that make me think of this whole thing, and this is just the one I picked for this talk, is, wow, we're just inundated with information and words and advertisement and influence to try and get us to pick things. Media, social media, articles, blogs. Which tool is the best? Which tool is the hottest? What are you going to get a job in? What's the new sexy thing to work on? A lot of times I get questions about what's the best tool? What's the best tool for this? Why are you working on that? And why aren't you using this other thing? And the problem when we start talking about best is that we're missing context. We're missing the ecosystem. And when we're missing the ecosystem, we can't really talk about best. All we can really talk about is most appropriate. For me, it is appropriate for this particular activity. And I get to see this a lot with multiple clients. I go to client A, and the approach is very similar to each of the clients because they're all sort of solving the same problems. But when it comes to the implementation and the tool set and who's going to press the keys versus who's going to look at the results, all these things start to change because none of these companies and none of these teams are the same. So necessarily they need to be context sensitive. We need to understand it. Only we know our own context. So what's best for me might not be best for you, and what's best for you might not be best for me. So when we look at choosing technologies and choosing approaches, we can't deal strictly with the eyes of celluloid, right? All the commercials, all the advertisement, all the promos, all that stuff, the demos, all those things that you can get. We should be aware. That helps us sort of color what our impressions are and what might be a good choice for us. But we won't know until we actually use it and get it into a real prototype on our real system. So always consider your context when deciding what's appropriate. And when you're listening to advertisements and promos and marketing and all these other things, make sure that you kind of understand it there. Iced Earth is another favorite band of mine, sort of mix. If you take Iron Maiden, Metallica, and sort of mix them together, that's the kind of music we're talking about here. And on this particular record, Something Wicked This Way Comes, there's a song called The Coming Curse. And the lyric that's always appealed to me is Savior to my own, devil to some. And what that means is when we come in and we're going to automate or we're going to make changes, whether you're a change agent, you're an automator, you're a tester, whatever you're doing, there will be people who don't want any part of what you're doing. There will be those people, and that's fine. And so often we try to spend all our time concentrating on winning those people over, because it's important a lot of times to win those people over. But doing it actively and with a frontal assault is not always the best approach. Sometimes you say, I understand your skepticism, okay? I'm not the devil here. I understand your skepticism. I'm going to go work with this other team who wants what I'm selling and work with them, get some credibility, show the value. Very often, if you show value with team B, team A will come around and go, hey, wait a minute, why am I not seeing all that value? Well, because you didn't want to participate. Let's talk about the terms of your participation here. Look for your friendlies. Work with your friendlies. Your friendlies can give you valuable context about what sort of situation you're in. And if you work with them, they will help evangelize, especially if you are successful with them. So consider focusing on your friendlies at the start instead of the people that are that are a bit reticent. Blind Guardian, power metal band from Germany. Very, very expansive songs. They've progressed very, very much over the years. It's interesting to listen to album to album to album. And my favorite by them is called Imaginations from the Other Side, which is also the title song. And the lyrics here, Imaginations from the Other Side, far out of nowhere, it got back to my mind. What this appeals to me for is to use our imaginations. We talk so much about automation and test scripts and test cases and tools. In my world, that's an implementation of automation. For me, automation is the judicious application of technology to help people do their jobs. And in my world, that set of people are testers, sometimes developers as well. You might say delivery team, but generally it's more directly associated with what testers are doing. Because automation does not have to come from test cases. Let's expand that definition in what automation is. And look at where can we apply some technology? Where can we spray some help and get some value out of that and make it so that we can do more of our job faster, better, whatever the goal is there. So remember, use your imagination. Look for pain points. Look for opportunities to exploit value. And I think I'm wrapping up here. Heading for tomorrow, Gamma Ray. So there's a band called Halloween that I love. As you can tell, I love a lot of these bands. Their main guitar player left sort of in the late 80s, and he created this band called Gamma Ray. This was their first record called Heading for Tomorrow. And when I was putting this talk together, I'm like, we need something for the future. And I just started running lyrics through my head about what appeals to me about the future. And this one jumped out. It's we're heading for tomorrow. We don't know if we're near. Will we beg or steal or borrow? Will we ever lose the fear? And what that means to me is, what's next? What are we going to do next for testing, for development, for automation? Specifically in the automation realm, I don't know. I see what a lot of the vendors are doing now. The vendors are, they're looking at a couple of different things that I'm really encouraged by. The AI not that I care that much one way or the other about the implementation of AI, but what I see a lot of the companies doing is saying, you spend a lot of time on rework. You spend a lot of time maintaining tests because the web pages have changed or because the APIs changed. What if we could do some of that automatically for you? Now, I'm not a big fan of magic automation, change everything in the background. You don't know things changed. But a lot of these tools, they say, hey, we couldn't find whatever widget you were looking for using the way you told us to find it or the way we initially decided to find it. But we found it this other way. Do you want to change over to this other way now? And I think that's great, because if we look at where we spend most of our time on an automation implementation, it's not the upfront implementation. It's the maintenance across the whole life cycle or the whole lifespan of that automation. So we have to look at the total cost of ownership, which is sort of a big concept and something very hard to digest, but we can digest parts of it at a time. But if what we're looking at is high maintenance cost, what is often value is driving that maintenance cost down so that we get more value out of it. But then there's the fear part. We hear a lot of things of, my company's going to DevOps. What happens to the testers? Well, lots of different things can happen. You can still be testers, because in order to have a fully DevOpsian, no humans look at this before it goes out, in my opinion, and my limited expertise with working with those types of teams, you have to be able to have a low cost of failure and a low cost of change. Otherwise, you're going to want some humans to have some eyes on this before it goes out, because there are things we can't automate yet. And there are things we shouldn't automate yet because the value is not there. So it might be a bit of scary, but should be fun. So wrapping up now for the TLDR set, what was this talk about? It's about being responsible. Being responsible, looking at value, and learning a little bit about some metal lyrics. So here are the band and artwork references. You'll be able to look at them if you go and review the tape later, the video later. God, I'm showing my age. But now I will take questions, Adi.
Great, thank you. So first of all, a lot of people said that they're extremely jealous of you after that first slide with all the images of you with rock stars. So just so you know, so I think a lot of people even dropped off. They were so mad with jealousy. Just FYI.
Well, that makes me sad. I don't want anybody to be so mad that they dropped off the call.
Yeah, but it was, I myself am very jealous, was very jealous. So you mentioned fear of the future, and we did get a lot of questions that has to do, I don't know if specifically with the presentation, but as a test automation expert and as a manager in this industry. So we got a lot of questions around it, and this is like one that we get every time. So what are you looking for when you are hiring a test automation engineer, and what are the skills that testers will be required to have under their belt in upcoming years? So I think everyone here would love your input on that as a manager.
So I'm going to give you the answer everybody hates, but I will qualify it after, I promise. And the answer is, it depends. And what depends is what kind of company I'm working for, what type of organization I'm looking for. Going back to that ecosystem, I need to evaluate the ecosystem, because when we talk about audience, part of the audience are those people that are doing the job, typing the keys, looking at the results. I've been in organizations where I'm looking for hardcore developers that either have a computer science degree or have 5, 6, 7, whatever years in the trenches, that know how to develop and debug software, because I'm going to be off doing other things. I need some strong programmers. I've had other situations where what I'm looking for is strong problem solvers and strong testers, and I will teach you the programming. We'll get you some external you'll go to Pluralsight or whatever, and then I'll teach you sort of my flavor of what my expectations are, and then we'll go through this together. The teams I like the best are the ones that, if it's large enough, or if I can have a large enough team, of the ones that I've got some strong leadership type programmers who can do all the stunt programming, but know better than to do it too often, and that have the ability to coach up other people who have the sort of the lateral learning skills there, where, okay, I did some Visual Basic a few years ago, or I have an information science degree where we did a little bit of programming, but I don't know C#. That matters and it doesn't, right? There are ways to teach people how to do things through coursework, through actual on-the-job, actually doing work training. So what skills do you want? What you want to do is you want to show that you are valuable. And again, this is not for everybody, because I do see job postings out there with a laundry list of requirements, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes the manager doesn't know better. Sometimes there are HR restrictions on what can be in a job application or a job description. So there are reasons, some bad, some really bad. But I do see other people out there complaining, saying, they want somebody with experience, How do I get experience? Sadly, the only way to get experience is to get experience. And you may have to spend some time looking around for that right first opportunity. But for skills, code, but that doesn't mean you need to be a developer. That doesn't mean you need to be a programmer. You need to understand code. You need to be able to look at code. You need to be able to look at where the code is and spot potential places to do testing. If you can code, or if you can learn how to code, that's going to give you additional opportunities. What language should you learn? That's a harder question. A lot of times it depends on what company are you in. Or you want to stay with your company, you want to go to a different company. What does a different company do? They do the same language your current company does. What part of the world are you in? And some areas favor Java, some areas favor .NET, some are a big blend. You start with something that you can digest and then move on.
So as a follow-up question, and I saw that quite a bit in the questions here and also in other webinars. So when we're talking about test automation, do you think the tester job will remain as test automation engineer, or will it morph into development and then DevOps? Do you think we'll still have that tester/test automation engineer in the upcoming future?
So what I see personally, and this is probably a bit of a shorter term view, but what I see is, again, there are things that can't be automated and things that shouldn't be automated. For those things, we're either not going to test them, which some companies might do, and others will be, yes, we need humans to go in and have a look at this, because the cost of failure is too high, or a cost of change is too high. I worked for an or a retail company, and the cost of change for their point of sale system was huge, because it was slow to roll it out. They'd have to retrain the people in the 2,500 stores or whatever it was, and it was, let's say it was 5 people per store. That's a lot of training, a lot of effort, and if we blow the rollout, we have to roll the new version or the old version back out, which sometimes wasn't a trivial thing. So the cost of failure there was huge. So the testing effort was huge. The oversight level was huge. The code review effort was huge, because the cost of failure was huge. But if you're rolling out a 99-cent game, or if you're the only player in town, I'm looking at you, Facebook. Oh my God, Facebook's down. What are you going to do? You're going to go to Facebook's competitor? Who's that? Who's Facebook's competitor? Oh, Instagram. Wait, they own Instagram and they're down too. So you see what I'm getting at here? It matters. Everything, all these sort of pieces matter. And is it going to be that testers are going away? I don't see that in my lifetime, and probably not in my kids' lifetime. They're only 5. So in their lifetime, is the role going to change? Yes. Is it going to become more, quote, technical? Probably. Does technical mean you have to be a programmer or a coder? Not necessarily. It depends on your job and your team and your company.
So as a follow-up question to that, people are asking, so how would you recommend, I mean, a lot of the concepts that you talked about here are from this bird view of top management, but our, testers and test automation practitioners are asking, so how would you recommend for me to show my value as a tester within the organization?
So a couple of things there. One is, while what I've talked about here is sort of conceptual, it does work down to the micro level. When we talk about value, when we talk about, is the thing I'm doing providing value? Maybe you have the latitude and the authority to stop what you're doing because it's not providing value. Or maybe it's part of your job. It's incumbent upon you, as we say, the good corporate citizen, to go to your boss and say, I'm spending 10 hours doing this, but it's really only providing 20 minutes versus worth of value. Is there any reason we should not change what we're doing here? So it's incumbent upon all of us to look at everything in these business value slides. And again, I'm not talking about people with business administration degrees and accounting degrees and finance degrees. I'm talking about basic, is this thing heavier than this other thing, right? If it's costing you more than the value you're getting out of it, you should stop. Hey, I've got Netflix and it's costing me, what, $10 a month or $12 or whatever it is, and I watch it once a year. Is that a good value? I don't know. Do you get $120 or $180 of value out of it that one time you watch it? Or if not, then perhaps that's not a good value and you should stop it. So how can you be responsible and show your value is to point out these things we're doing is valuable or are valuable, and these things might not be. They're sort of suspect, because saying they're not valuable is hard because you don't have all the context. But if you can see value, then obviously you can promote it and advertise it and go, hey, look what we did. We developed this widget. And yeah, it's not a test script or a test case, but it's saving a day a week for data entry. Huzzah, t-shirts for everyone. That's something that any responsible leader should be able to understand and appreciate. If not, maybe you're working for the wrong leader.
So I think that I don't think, I know that we are criminally out of time. So we are well after the hour. So I think that we're going to stop here. I see a lot of comments and thank you notes to Paul. I promise all of you that I will send all your thank you notes to him after the session. So of course you can keep those coming, but I think that we will have to wrap it up. So I want to thank everyone that joined the session and took the time out of their day to join us. And of course, I want to thank Paul Grizzaffi for this great and super creative presentation. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you everyone that took your time, your lunch hour, whatever, to sit and listen to me babble about some of my favorite things.
Great. So the recording will be sent to you by Monday, end of day, hopefully earlier, and I hope to see you at our next event. So thank you.